Hello ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? It's your boy iz33, welcome you to this week's Anarchy Analysis Match of the Week here in the LCS. We are covering C9 versus FlyQuest, this entire series from game 1 through to the last game, and this first game is a very interesting one and we've got a lot to talk about as we're gonna immediately DJ spinning up that track and load into Champion Select for game number 1. So game 1, C9 are on blue, FlyQuest are on red, and the first ban we've got to talk about is the Trundle ban. It is a big ban because that kind of hints to your opposition, hey, we want to play tanks. Because Trundle obviously is the tank killer, he's the king of killing tanks because of his Subjugate ultimate, essentially nullifies how effective they are. And realistically, it's going to be a nice ban for C9. Obviously, they may be expecting Solo or Santorin to play, say, a Volibear or something along those lines, or they want to play something along those lines and try and counteract how FlyQuest want to play these burst-heavy champion styles. Anyway, next ban that comes in is the Callista from FlyQuest. Big ban. Obviously, one of the most predominant ADCs in the current meta, usually is banned out for most of the series that I've seen so far. It's been very powerful when it's allowed through because of the ability to stack up rend spears and be able to control objectives through essentially an execution is sort of the style that teams have been using it for, and because of the high priority of objectives in the current season, it's essentially very big in terms of a champion. And usually when this ban comes through, you'd expect probably an Ashe or a Callista, Caitlyn ban from the opposition to essentially mean, yeah, you're not getting this champion or that champion, and as such, it is kind of a nice ban from FlyQuest to obviously try and force a certain ban out from C9. Anyway, Graves is the next ban from C9. Obviously, they do not want Santorin being a carry threat like he's known to be in that jungle. Obviously, he's picked up quite a lot of play of the games from his role, and as such, it kind of comes down to these carry-heavy champions, which he's played quite a lot of, and as such, Graves gets removed because of his carry potential. Obviously, very quick jungler in terms of clear rate, and as such is very strong in terms of his actual damage in late game and ability to essentially burst out the opponents. Anyway, the next ban is the Olaf from FlyQuest. I like that because Blabber in the first half of the split was undefeated on this Olaf, and not allowing it to go through is kind of smart because he's played that very well, and realistically has been the only thing this split that he's actually shined on as a pick. And I love when teams ban out a champion that's very strong for a certain player, and Olaf is no exception. Because of the CC reduction with that Ragnarok ultimate, it's very powerful and has gotten very good early game clear rates, so I like this response ban to the Graves by banning out another carry essentially in the jungle. Anyway, C9's last ban in this first phase is the Caitlyn. And I'm actually surprised they banned the Caitlyn here, because you could essentially ban out the Ashe, which is a champion teams have been kind of counterpicking into Caitlyn, and it'd be smarter because you can then get a better siege opportunity with this champion, and you'd probably be playing into either an Ezreal or a Jhin, as they're the kind of the other two champions that are high in priority, especially Jhin into Caitlyn, because it kind of does a similar thing to what the Caitlyn does, though you are minimized by the amount of autos you can do. Anyway, last ban in this phase is the Set, and I like this from FlyQuest because Set is a champion that obviously can be flexed between mid, which Niski has played. He played it in one of the last couple of games that C9 played in a regular split, and obviously can be played jungle or support. And if you don't know C9, they're very good at playing these engage heavy supports like the Set, because you can showstopper in, you can pull in your team, or the enemy team really close to you and do a bunch of damage with a haymaker. That's essentially the effect of this champion, so having it in support, it does about the same thing, but you become that very, very bulky front line instead of the massive damage dealer, so removing that from the field is a good thing for FlyQuest, and it's going to be interesting how these two teams play out this first pick phase, considering some of the big OPs have been left open on patch 10.16, and some of the big ones that normally slip through the ban phase have been banned, and it's going to be interesting to see what these two teams prioritize first. So let's look at the first round of picks, and we see C9 preference their bot laner in here, and they go with the Ezreal first pick. Now obviously Sven's Ezreal is actually something to be feared. It's one of his most picked ADCs in the LCS all time. He's got an insane win record on it, and it is very, very feared, and realistically it is a good first pick for C9. Obviously that does mean that FlyQuest get the Ashe in response, which can deal with the Ezreal poke quite nicely by firing her own poke into him, and she also provides a lot more map pressure and objective control with them hawk shots, and she can match the true shot barrage of the Ezreal with the glacial arrow and essentially lock up targets, which the Ezreal cannot do, and obviously it is very, very powerful. Now the next pick is something that we've never talked about in this series until now, and it's going to be Lila. And Lila is actually very, very nice here, and she's been picked up more and more in recent weeks ever since she's been enabled into pro play, and realistically she's been being very dominant in jungle matchups because of her very, very strong early clear, being very, very quick in terms of the fact that her Q is true damage, and that damage hurts a lot onto those minions and the neutral camps. It's very, very powerful as a champion, plus the fact that your watch out Eep ability, aka your W, you can jump on top of people, damaging them quite a lot, and with your E being global, you essentially do a lot of work for very little realistical ability cost. And as such, this champion's very, very powerful in terms of chasing down your opponents with a passive. Every ability you land, you essentially get to move quicker, and with your essential ult, putting people to sleep, you can chase down people quite quickly and be very, very potent in team fights. Now, the last two picks for C9 in this phase is securing the Yuumi for the bot lane matchup, which I like. You're not revealing your other solo laners, you're instead just picking a very safe support. Plus, Ezreal Yuumi is a very dominant duo in that bot side because you have so much poke with the Prowling Projectile and the Mystic Shots. You also do have your heals on the Yuumi, though it has been nerfed quite considerably, obviously with the 15% mana cost on that actual spell being very, very taxing on your mana pool. You realistically do have to be quite sparing with your mana on Yuumi after them changes, but this champion's paired along with the TF, and I like this pick a lot because the Ezreal wants to poke you down. You also have a Yuumi who works quite well with the Ezreal's ultimate, the TF ultimate, because you're allowed to TP to people and be an absolute menace. It is very, very powerful to just sit on top of him, TP in, use your final chapter, and essentially kill someone off, and be very, very powerful in that sort of effect. So this TF combo is very, very strong. But FlyQuest respond with the Thresh. I like this pick because essentially if you land a hook early onto an Ezreal, you're more than likely getting a 2-for-1 hook, and if you can lock up the Yuumi with your death sentence, you're essentially stopping her from getting back to safety with the you and me, and you can flay her back into your team, essentially killing her off for free. It's a very, very powerful champion Thresh because you also provide some repositioning tools with that lantern for anyone who's caught out, but more importantly, your very immobile ADC that you have picked up. here in this first phase. So overall, these two teams are drafted quite nicely for phase 1. Let us look at the next round of bans and then possibly the last round of picks. So let's take a look-see at this second round of bans. We start off with FlyQuest removing the Jace from the top side of matchup. They do not want Licorice on a very strong carry S champion in that top side of the match. I like this ban because Jace is very powerful in terms of actual harassment. Obviously you can put down 9 Qs, and considering how C9 have actually drafted so far, they have basically gone for this poke comp-esque scheme. So Jace ban is very, very strong in terms of removing a very strong poke champion in that top lane. As for the C9 team, they ban out the Ori here. They're essentially saying, hey PoE, you realistically only have like one champion, and this Ori, which is very strong blind pick, you're not getting your hands on this. Very, very nicely done here by C9, because Ori obviously have a lot of lane power which can push into a TF quite easily. I'd expect probably a LeBlanc or in a Zir ban to follow that up from C9, because you're essentially putting PoE on a champion that cannot like stop TF's lane dominance in certain ways. So I like that ban from C9 as a whole. The last ban for FlyQuest in this game will be the GP ban. Obviously a very strong blind pick top laner. Obviously you have the barrel poke. It's also providing a global, and as such realistically will do quite good. It's also one of them good champions into a Shen, because you can respond with the Stand United with your own global, as well as the fact that you can also poke him through his W with your barrel chains, as well as stack up your Q harassment on a Shen very easily without taking too much damage in response. And the last ban in this phase is LeBlanc. I said C9 would probably go for this ban, and the reason being is LeBlanc's a great champion into TF because you can essentially distort on top of the TF as he's using his Destiny, and essentially lock him up with your chains and essentially stop him from getting into any sort of fight, and realistically can match his roam with your own distort roams. So it is a very nice ban from C9 because you're removing essentially a counter of TF, and realistically making this ban phase worthwhile. And I do like these bans coming out from both teams here, as we'll jump into this last round of picks. So let us round out these two drafts, starting with the FlyQuest first pick here, being the Shen. It obviously was going to come through in this game, as it's been picked up by pretty much every team in playoffs as this very strong top laner here in the LCS. It provides a lot of power and a lot of flexibility into your drafts. You obviously can go very split push heavy. It's also a great champion to respond to the TF Destiny, in terms of the fact that you can join the fight with your Stand United, as well as taking TP to essentially give yourself a global advantage in the top lane, and as such it's very, very strong and very, very powerful as a pick. And with the GP ban already coming through, it essentially gives this Shen a lot more prowess to harass and be very, very powerful. Now the response from C9 is the Vladimir, and this kind of amplifies the amount of AP damage they have. Obviously TF was their only main AP source until Vlad was locked in, and this Vlad will essentially provide a bit more damage in terms of backline access, because he can easily enter the backline by going into his Sanguine Pool and then just bursting them down with a Hemo Plague and getting all his health back, and you don't have to worry about your mana on this champion. And he is health reliant, which works quite well with the Yuumi. So obviously you can go into the backline as a Yuumi on top of this Vlad, and essentially just heal him up as he's in the Sanguine Pool. And it is very, very powerful as a combo, and will work well with this last pick for C9. They complete their comp with a Nocturne, and they're essentially adding in a lot of engage into the backline, as Nocturne is very good. Obviously the Paranoia combines with the TF ult. You essentially can make a very strong combo, because you can use your Nocturne ult to turn the lights off and kind of cancel out the Shen's effectiveness. Obviously the Paranoia will turn it blank, and Shen obviously won't have access to his minimap to click on a teammate, and he won't be able to see his teammates at all. So if he hasn't casted Stand United already, it's very easy for the C9 team to burst out someone before Shen gets into a fight. So realistically, Solo has to be playing with his eyes constantly on that minimap and constantly being ready to press the button before Blabber presses the button. Now the last pickup in this phase is going to be the Azir for PoE. I like this pick obviously because you do have technically a bit of a roam with the shuffles across the board, and obviously it's very, very strong in terms of the fact you can actually use the Sand Soldiers to get behind this TF, who is, while being able to use his ult to get across the map and get a bit of movement speed with his Nimbus Cloak, he is a very immobile mid laner because he doesn't have too much of skills other than a gold card to stop you from diving on top of him. And as such, using your ultimate, you can essentially push him into your team and get very easy kills with your ultimate, and it is a very nice pick to round out this FlyQuest draft. Obviously, C9 want to play this pick comp that also has a bit of poke with the Ez and the Yuumi, so they have a very safe bot side and a lot of engage and dive with their top half of the map. And FlyQuest have this kind of pick comp realistically. You've got the Ash Arrow, you have the Thresh Hooks, and then the Lila Sleeps, and you essentially can just chase down targets, isolate them, use your Shen ult to obviously amplify the chase down, and also using the Azir to kind of just sweep in enemies and protect your team in disengage. So I like these two drafts as a whole. They have clear goals in how they want to play it, and as such, we've got nothing more to say about this. Let us jump into game number 1 of this best of 5. FlyQuest are on Soul Point and are already in position for it 22 minutes in. Destiny is used by TF on C9's side of things to spot Fly on the Drake alongside Vlad, who is TPing from C9's base to get nearer to the pit. TF uses the second half of his ultimate to get behind Fly and set up the pinch onto them from behind. Nock engages with his Paranoia onto the Lila alongside the Vlad, who comes in from the side to get a 3-man Hemoplague, and using his Sanguine Pool perfectly to avoid the Shen taunt. Niski also is carrying the Yuumi, and the little cat is rooting targets with the final chapter, forcing Lila and Thresh into their statuses, or stopwatches / Zonyas, depending on which they have, to avoid the Hemoplague damage and any other follow-up damage from the root. Now the positioning of Vlad can be punished, seen as though he is split from his team, and Azir has popped Nocturne's Guardian Angel So FlyQuest are able to just focus fire down to Vlad before he can rotate through his spells and get back to his team. Once Nocturne revives from his GA, he is immediately in the front line of FlyQuest. He is focused down by the 4 members that are alive due to Thresh being killed off by the Ezreal once he left his status after being rooted by Final Chapter. Now it's a 3v4. Shen is waiting on his taunt cooldown to come back up so he can use his flash aggressively and secure an easy lockup of either the TF or the Ezreal. He does use his taunt aggressively and flashes to secure the lockup of TF, forcing him into his own stopwatch, and essentially Fly surround him and are ready to pop him, forcing Ezreal and Yumi to run away. But here's the issue for them. They're on the FlyQuest side of the map, and it's very easy for Fly to chase him down, and Ezreal is basically gonna have to fight or flash away over a wall to keep himself safe. Ezreal, though, tries to get 1 kill back for himself by going very aggressive onto the Azir, but he is immediately killed off by the Ashe, and from there, a very defenseless cat is killed off, and FlyQuest get the soul secured for themselves, and Baron is gained alongside it, giving FlyQuest an easy win from this point forward. Welcome to Game 2. We start with the pick with some bans with C9 on blue, FlyQuest on red, nothing has changed there, and we immediately see our first change up in this phase. Lilia is banned out by C9. Obviously that hints me that they have no actual response to how this has been played by FlyQuest, so they obviously want to get this out of the pick ban phase. Now that does mean that Trundle is not banned, and the rest of the bans actually stay the same as we load into our first round of picks for these 2 side tier. We start with the Ezreal as the first pick up for C9. They're keeping this trend of a strong bot lane going. Obviously they did this in game 1, focusing the Ezreal as their first pick and realistically keeping the same thing. And as such, C9 FlyQuest respond alike, with the Ashe being their first pick up here, obviously keeping that strength going, but Delilah being banned means that Thresh gets moved up in priority and FlyQuest have their full bot lane locked in, a very poke heavy bot lane like game number 1, so it's just left to C9 to probably lock in their bot lane before the end of this actual phase 1 of picks. And what do you know, they lock in the Yumi as well as the actual GP, which wasn't actually picked up here for C9 in game number 1. They've put a bit more priority on it because they kind of expect FlyQuest to lock in the Shen for themselves in that top lane because of how prevalent it is as a top laner in the current meta and how effective it is to use that objective controlling skill of applying pressure on the other side of the map and then TPing in with either one of your TPs. So GP having his global ult and having the ability to use barrel chains to basically burst down Shen before he can actually enter a fight is very, very powerful, and as such it's a winning matchup for Z9 in that top half of the map if FlyQuest obviously lock in that Shen. Now the last pickup for Fly in this phase is actually a change up for themselves in that jungle. Obviously with Lilia banned, they go for the Volibear pickup, and we haven't discussed Volibear at all. He's a very strong dueling jungler, and as such it's very interesting for me to see how the C9 respond. obviously in terms of their jungle pick, because a dueling jungler early game is very good if you're FlyQuest, because it gives you a lot of hard engage with the Volibear running at you, as well as the fact that you can provide shielding, and having a very powerful ultimate that does tons of damage when he lands on top of you. It's very good for this FlyQuest squad, and something that's in Santorin's wheelhouse that's very effective. Nonetheless, that is the first round of picks gone over. Let us have a look-see at this second round of bans. So, this phase is picked up with FlyQuest taking the Trundle ban for themselves instead of C9. Obviously, that hints me that they want to play a tankier top lane, so obviously the Shen is going to be a bit more prevalent. Obviously, the Volibear is a very bulky champion, so having the Subjugate removed off the field is good for FlyQuest, considering the fact that C9 could obviously respond with this Trundle as their jungler for themselves. And looking at the rest of the bans, the Orianna stays obviously a very powerful pick for PoE. That was the same as game number 1, but the LeBlanc ban and the GB ban has been dropped from game 1 for both teams here, as TF is banned from FlyQuest here. That is not being played by C9, obviously it was played by them in game 1, and it provided a lot of harassment across the map, and it is kind of this counter to Shen, in terms of the fact that you can actually just respond with your own destiny to the Stand United coming out from Shen. So I like this ban from FlyQuest coming through, and Corki is the other ban that's changed here in this phase. It's a very nice ban, I guess you would say, because it's a very high pokey mid laner. Something that FlyQuest need with this team comp is a bit of poke and a bit of burst damage in that mid lane. So though LeBlanc is still available for them to probably first pick here in this phase 2, if they don't actually prioritize the Shen. So yeah, this is actually a nice pickup here for C9, though I might have expected maybe a Shen ban, considering even though they do have the counter pick already locked in this phase. So let's have a look-see at this last round of picks and see how these two teams finish out their drafts. So, like usual, we do see the Shen coming through for the FlyQuest squad. We're going to probably get used to seeing that because it's very powerful in this game and series. Obviously, he doesn't care if he's being camped quite hard by a GB who can just harass him and put him behind quite heavily easily. It's nice to see the Shen come through because he's just playing for his team instead of his lane. He's playing win game by not winning lane, but helping team win their lane. And yeah, this guy, I like it. Good pick for FlyQuest. The response though from C9 is a lot more early game pressure alongside burst potential. Something they need in order to access the backline of FlyQuest is the Akali pick they go for here. I like it. It's received buffs in recent patches, obviously the changes to the E becoming magic damage, as well as the fact that the changes to Presence of Mind near the start of this split allows Akali to actually be played a bit more easily, because Q changes were done at the start of the year and it increased the amount of mana cost and made it very energy consuming, so you could only realistically use 2 Qs before you ran out of your energy. Now with the Presence of Mind changes, you can get maybe 3 and 4 the more kills you get, and it's very nice to see this pick coming back into the meta because of the recent buffs to this champion. As for the last pick for Z9 in this phase, it's Lee Sin, which we haven't discussed yet. Very good roaming jungler, very early game power as terms of getting this team ahead. You can obviously affect this Shen quite heavily. If you kick him out of his W, he's not going to be blocking autos, and it's very good to do that alongside a GP. Get this GP ahead, it essentially means he doesn't have to leave lane and can essentially split push the map very effectively and get this C9 squad ahead and play for this split push style instead of this team fighting style that FlyQuest want to go with. And the last pick is this LeBlanc. I like it. You match the burst potential mid laner on the C9 side with a burst potential mid laner on the FlyQuest side. you can essentially roam a bit more easily on the LeBlanc because of your double distortions you get from your ultimate, and actually be a lane bully against this Akali, because it's quite hard for Akali early game to actually deal with a LeBlanc, because LeBlanc can chug up corrupting potions and essentially keep her mana totals topped up and very, very high in comparison to a very, very energy draining champion in Akali. So I like this pickup for FlyQuest into an Akali. It's very strong, you can lock her down. Obviously the chains actually reveal where Akali is when she goes into her Twilight Shroud, I should say, and makes it very easy to keep track of where she is once she gets rooted down by the chain. So I like this pickup for FlyQuest. It works very well with their team comp and is a very strong counter into the Akali. I'm surprised it actually was not banned, but I get why Ori and Corki were banned, because Corki can just fire rockets and poke you down through your Twilight Shroud, and Orianna can just place the ball and pull you out with a shockwave. So I like this pick from FlyQuest, taking the other counter option into this Akali. So game 2 is going to be interesting to see as we break down this team fight coming up. After just losing the last fight and conceding Baron, C9 tried to make a little cheeky play for themselves and sneak away the Drake while FlyQuest were resetting. And FlyQuest spot this out with the vision set up from the last fight, and LeBlanc and Volley get to the pit just in time to watch it die to C9's hands. Yuumi then channels the final chapter, and lovely positioning coming out from Ezreal allows the route onto the lanterning out Volibear, which allows C9 to dogpile onto him. Now the fight gets split up into two parts here, as Ezreal and Yuumi focus down the Thresh and kill him off on one side. Meanwhile, the other side sees Lee Sin and Akali perfectly execute and shut down the Ashe, while also putting LeBlanc down low enough for a parlay from the GP to kill her off. Then it's just Shen on his lonesome trying to escape, but he immediately gets caught out and kicked back into the C9 squad, and the pack of hungry wolves from C9, all 5 of them, basically kill him off, giving Ezreal the triple kill here, and the ace of FlyQuest, which means that this is game for C9, beating the Baroned up FlyQuest and picking up their first win in this best of 5. Welcome to game number 3, where we see FlyQuest on blue, C9 on red, and the bans stay fairly similar. The only thing that changes is C9 picks up the set ban here, instead of banning out the Graves they have done, thus meaning that FlyQuest get a change of their third ban in this phase, and they choose to ban out the TF that was very prevalent in game number 1, obviously affecting the map similarly to how a Shen would go, and this does mean that the Graves is open for FlyQuest's first pick. Obviously they do not have to ban it because they've actually used this champion and they use it very, very effectively. So nonetheless, let us look at this first round of picks here, and we start with that Graves obviously coming through here for FlyQuest. It's a big pick for them. Obviously it's a very farm heavy jungler that can carry late game, meaning that the Senna is more of a priority for FlyQuest here as their ADC instead of the Ashe they've been going towards, because Senna can provide a bit more supportive tools than what an Ashe can do, and Graves can technically be the AD carry that FlyQuest needs, instead of having a very, very powerful Ashe. Now, we do see yet again C9 focusing the Ezreal Yuumi combo here, going for the lock-in of that combo with their first round of picks here. Fairly standard. Obviously, we discussed it before, a lot of poke, a lot of harass, a lot of safety with this bot lane. So, I expect C9 to probably keep locking it in, unless it's banned out by Fly, but FlyQuest don't really care, as they lock in for themselves the Senna and Shen. So Senna's first pick here in this game, and it hasn't been seen at all in this series. Realistically, very strong in terms of the late game power. Scaling is the option here because you pick up their mobs, you get more range on your attacks, and you harass enemies a lot further, and you also provide healing to your teams, as well as the Dawning Shadow ultimate, essentially providing healing to your team so you win out sustained team fights going up against this Yuumi, because Yuumi's changes a few patches ago means that the mana cost for her is very, very large, and as such you don't realistically see her win out sustained out team fights unless she's able to pick up mana. Now, the last pick in this phase is the GP for C9. They're focusing yet again this blind pickable champion for the top lane. They're not going to Renekton or something along those lines, and I like that. GP obviously is very strong, global matching global as we said in game 2, so it is a good pick for them here, and I do respect this as a whole. As we look at this last round of bans here, LeBlanc and Thresh banned out here by C9, Lee Sin and Akali, the last two picks for C9 in game number 2 that won him it with that very strong combo of the perfect execution and kick that we just broke down. It's a good response here from FlyQuest, and with them having this Graves locked in and Lila being banned by C9, there isn't too many late scaling junglers available for C9, so they're probably going to have to preference the early game if you are C9 in terms of picks that are readily and available. Should also point out Orianna is available if C9 wants it, but you may not see it being picked up by either team here, and it has made it through for the first time into a pick phase that isn't pick phase 2. And yeah, realistically, 2 drafts as it shapes up, you expect FlyQuest to draft an AP mid, C9 probably to do the same, and as a whole these two teams probably needing a bit more of a stronger, bulkier frontline, as supports for FlyQuest could probably determine that, and it's going to be interesting to see how these two teams pick in this phase, which we're going to see now, as the first pick for C9 in this phase is a Gragas, early game AP jungler. It has a lot of engage tools with the cask. You're essentially very, very strong. You can be a strong frontliner in terms of building a bit more tankier instead of full AP. But I like this pick as a whole. It's good into this Shen because you can knock him out of his W. It's good against Senna. You can force her away, just keep her out of range. And it's good into Graves, who is very close quarters, and you can keep him away from your team, and realistically not have to worry too much about AD damage from this FlyQuest squad, as you can just knock him away. Now the response from FlyQuest is to go back to the pick from game 1, which is the Azir. A very strong pick here for PoE, obviously he popped off on it in game 1, and the Nautilus is locked in alongside it, obviously with Thresh banned. It's kind of good to go with the Naut because it provides this sort of harassment that Thresh does, obviously with a hook, that depth charge, and the Dredge line combination of this champion with a lot of CC. It's good, but it's mostly one-way damage. You don't have the essential play that a Thresh has to kind of disengage with the box, so in a sense you're kind of taking a one-way trip into this fight. Now the last champ to discuss in this game is a Zoe for Niski. It's one of his most picked champions as a whole. I don't like it into the Nor or the Shen, I guess. Even the Azir, it's kind of a weird pick for me because you can get easily jumped on by this FlyQuest squad. I'd expect maybe a Syndra would have been better. Even a Orianna would also be a lot stronger than a Zoe, but because you've actually got movement tools that don't take you back to where you start. And as such, it's a nice pickup here, but it's more poke and burst rather than safety for a mid laner. And you could, in theory, have gone with a Galio here for Niski and played a similar sort of effect that the TF had in their game 1. But no, they go with this Zoe. I guess it's because Niski feels comfortable on it. But nonetheless, that is going to be the draft for game number 3 here. Let us hop into this team fight where we're going to break it down. This is a nice short and sweet play to discuss how to play from a deficit and from poor vision control. So, FlyQuest are down close to 5k gold and C9 are on the verge of winning the game. But FlyQuest have other plans for this, as Nautilus sweeps away any vision from C9 in their path, which allows Shen to sneak into the mid-river brush. Unaware of this, Ezreal walks into his doom, and he is immediately taunted and swept into the depth charge from the Azir and Shen combination, and then the Naught's depth charge ultimate, and Ezreal is frantically trying to get away, arcane shifting and flashing to create a big enough gap from the FlyQuest team. It isn't enough. He gets shut down here, leaving a poor, innocent, defenseless cat yet again on her lonesome, and she is trying to flee to the GP who's waiting to pick her up as this sort of taxi system. But because Senna at this point in the game has so many souls, she has such a big range, she's just able to auto down this Yuumi for basically free thanks to an extra ult from Graves putting her low, and thus the Yuumi dies before getting to GP. And because GP's obviously roamed to make the save, he's in a bad position. Yeah, he's in the middle of the pit, and FlyQuest jump on top of him, locking him up as he's popping down the cannon barrage to maybe save himself. He's on his lonesome in 5 members of FlyQuest. He's getting shut down here. He dies, and because of that, perfectly timed as well, the Mountain Soul spawns. Yeah, FlyQuest get that for themselves. And because of the pretty much team fight sweep, the only members left alive is a Zoe and a jungler for C9. Essentially, it's a free Baron for FlyQuest here, and with it, they're able to push into C9's base and win the game there, taking it to 2-1 in terms of score and into game number 4. Welcome to game number 4. We see C9 on blue side, FlyQuest on red side. Be ready for the shortest ban phase talk from me. Reason being is it's exactly the game 2 ban. Obviously nothing realistically has changed here, so expect probably some similar first picks from either team here. Obviously game 2 worked out very well for C9, so let's see if it works out well for them here. As we look at the first round of picks, what do you know, it's an Ezreal prioritised for C9. Yeah, not much more I can say about that. It's what they've gone with every single game, and as such, the response from FlyQuest is to go with Shen and the Senna. They didn't go for this in game 2, I don't believe they went with Ashe. obviously the Shen works out well for them, obviously providing the stand united in threat that way. And the Senna obviously is very powerful for them, obviously with last game it popping off, with the range deficit being able to harass this Ezreal and Yumi from range is very big for them, and the heals just provide a lot for them. Now we do see the GP and Yumi yet again from C9, obviously global matching global, and then that wombo combo bot lane for C9. There's not much more to say about it. But FlyQuest, instead of locking in their support, they yet again go with this Volibear. I like it. It means that C9 have to waste bands towards the support if they want to. And as a whole, Volibear is a very strong duelist jungler. Not much more to say about that as we look at this second round of picks. Trundle, Akali, LeBlanc, Izir banned out here. And there's one change up here. It's the Trundle being banned out by FlyQuest instead of them banning out the Lee Sin. They let that one go through, and the Akali obviously is stopped. LeBlanc and Azir. Azir was strong in last game by FlyQuest obviously sweeping up the Ezreal in that last team fight and winning the game off of it, so it's very good for them to obviously ban it out. Azir, LeBlanc, high amount of burst, works well into a lot of champions, so I like that as a whole. And looking at this last round of picks, we start with the first change up here. It's going to be the Rakan. I like it. It's probably Ignar's most winning support. He's played it probably the most. Very, very strong. You've got a lot of engage, and in comparison to Nautilus, you have a bit more ability to escape from fights. You're not going head first in and not being able to protect yourself. You essentially have the same amount of CC with that quickness as well, and with how Cloud9 have drafted previously, they have very little CC, and as such this Rakan should do a lot of work for them, especially going into Zoe, who, spoiler alert, you use your W on where the puddle jump starts. She gets knocked up, immediately charmed and countered. So I don't like this pickup for C9 as a whole in the Zoe, but the Lee Sin makes a bit more sense. You can kick back. The squishy Senna, who is very immobile, I guess. The only issue is the Curse of the Black Mist will kind of stop some of these kicks coming through because of the fact that it makes him untargetable for point and click abilities. I like this pick in certain aspects, I don't like it in others. As for the last pick of the game, we've got a lot to talk about here. It's a Malzahar. This pick is very rarely seen. It's strong in terms of pushing lane and winning it. You get to level 3, you win lane. That's it, you get your Malefic Vision, you have your Voidlings, and then your Q clears out the caster minions. That wave is pushing constantly, plus you have a point and click CC ult. You're going to be forcing Cloud9 to pay the Mal's tax. Forget about the Skarner tax, Mal's tax is where it's at. It's point and click stun. Then you have Volibear jumping over the top. You have the Shen engaging with the Stand United and then taunting up that target. They're locked up to death, especially with Dawn Shadow over the top to give this Malzahar shielding so he can just CC lock you up. It's a very strong combination FlyQuest have drafted here, and I love this draft completely in comparison to C9's, which is a bit more just rinse, repeat, and hope that you win, where you haven't in the previous game. So let's jump into this last play, or possible last play, who knows. Welcome to yet another battle for Soul. We start with a solo waiting for Zoe to portal jump so that he can get an easy taunt onto her, and he lands this as well, forcing the cleanse out of the Zoe. Then it becomes two separate 4v1s as Shen is battling the entire C9 roster and Lee Sin is battling the entire FlyQuest team. And this also ends with both teams trading a kill. Lee Sin dies on the side of C9, and Rakan dies for FlyQuest. So support for jungler is big if you're FlyQuest, considering Sol is literally being kicked off here. Then C9 force Shen to flash over the wall and recall back to base to kind of reset and TP back into the fight. Knowing this, because of their blue trinkets, GP does the same. He recalls back to the base so he can match TPs with the Shen. And while this is going on, it's good to point out here that Malzahar has used his Voidling smartly. He has kept this Drake from actually dropping aggro and keeping it below half HP, and essentially making it very easy for FlyQuest to actually take this. And here is where C9 actually lose the fight. Zoe uses her portal jump forward, allowing for FlyQuest to capitalize, and moving forward, Malzahar uses his Nether Grasp onto the Zoe, locking her in place, giving an easy kill over to the team. And Senna uses her snare, her W, onto Ezreal, forcing out both summoners, which is a huge thing to say, and Zoe dies as soon as this happens. Now, both top laners have returned at this point, and Shen is chasing down the Ezreal, who is summonerless, and the Yuumi, and he doesn't get any kill credit onto the Ezreal, but he starts to chase down the Yuumi, who is fleeing from the fight, whereas GP kills the Malzahar, who is just stalling on the Drake, keeping it alive, keeping it ticking down in health, and then he kills off the Volley, but what Volley ends up doing before he dies is he gets the actual Infernal Soul for FlyQuest, and nothing realistically happens from there other than a bit of jostling between the top laners and the ADC of FlyQuest, and the jungler and the support for either side that died at the start of the fight have actually made it back, because the fight lasts so long. They're able to get there, but nothing else happens. The two teams disengage, and essentially FlyQuest win the fight, and with Baron alive, they can start pressurizing the map for that objective, and from it, they win the game. So, poor positioning and vision control is things that we've seen from C9 in this entire series, as well as inexperience on certain champions. Essentially gives this series very nicely over to FlyQuest. Obviously, you could say FlyQuest through game number 2, and realistically, it could have been a clean sweep for them. And I'm actually surprised it isn't. FlyQuest fully deserved to win the series. C9 did not show up at all. And amazing work by the lineups to actually get to Worlds for the first time in a long time for some of these players. But nonetheless, that's going to be it for this video. It's taken me 3 days to make this. I'm sorry I've been so long in doing so. I missed a day of upload as well because of this. But if you enjoyed it, leave a like down below. Subscribe if you want to. I'll start work on the Schalke video now. And I'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Thank you.